Well, I want to thank you all for coming, both here, headquarters in Germantown and at our field offices and sites and labs, all part of our DOE family. I have to say off the bat, with a little apology, it's been really too long since we've had this kind of complex-wide town hall meeting, but obviously we were stimulated by a recent event, namely our new Deputy Secretary coming on board. Of course, I'll return to that, and she will be saying a few words before we take questions. I do want to note that that since our last meeting, we have had a few people confirmed by the Senate. We always think it's not quite the pace we would like, but nevertheless, we are very pleased. Brad Kroll, here in the front row, is was the first in that line, heading our congressional and intergovernmental office. Steve Kroll, General Counsel. Actually, why don't you both stand up so people, in case people don't know you, they can see who you are. Right? Thank you. And not here because NNSA is having all their senior leadership is out in Germantown. Hello, Germantown. The leadership in NNSA, General Klotz, Frank Klotz, and Madeline Creedon were both also confirmed earlier this year. So our team is coming on board, and again, of course, Liz is now in her second week here at DOE, and again, I'll return to that soon. Seeing Liz, of course, reminds us all again to thank our former Deputy Secretary, Dan Poneman, who we have seen since he stepped down, and he is looking happy. In fact, you may have seen, I think it was just yesterday, the announcement was made formally about his appointment at Harvard right now, at least during the transition. He'll be at the Kennedy School at Harvard. And as you all know, probably most of you were at his going away. Dan stayed well beyond his 5th year, a record, at my request, so that as part of the transition we could have kind of a seamless one. And now I think we are having a seamless one with our new Deputy Secretary, Liz Sherwood-Randall. Liz, I think most of you know, but just say she's come to us directly from the National Security Council, where she was the White House coordinator for defense policy, countering WMD and arms control. She has had previous go-rounds in the administration, as I did, in the Clinton administration, for example, as Deputy Assistant Secretary at Department of Defense for Russia, Ukraine, and Eurasia. These are words that are in the news today. And so again, certainly in our security mission, Liz comes hitting the ground very much running with her background there. But obviously here, she will be, as S2, spanning our entire mission space, including energy and science and environmental management issues, human resource development, just across the board, because I do want to say right now, as I did say nearly 17 months ago when I started, and with Dan Poneman, that we will be running very much a unitary secretary, deputy secretary office, both of us spanning the missions, the challenges in the department, although obviously taking leadership in different ways. Liz also has, again, as I have had in between those government stints and around them, various academic experiences. We share the one at Stanford. We don't share the one at Harvard. We share the same town, but not the same institution. And Liz, her first role in government was, as some of you may have heard, at her ceremonial swearing in with the vice president, that she started as kind of a senior foreign affairs and defense advisor to then Senator Joe Biden. So it's great. It's a great background for coming here to the department. What I'll do, I'm just going to give a few, especially in light of the length of time that's passed, just a few kind of updates in our mission space, and a couple things that are that are coming up. Then we'll ask the Deputy Secretary to say a few words of introduction of herself and her plans here, our plans here, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. Both here and with questions which I think have come in remotely by email. So clearly, two of our major responsibilities for the President lie in the area of climate and energy and in nuclear security. On the climate front, it's a very, very important period. I think, as most of you know, this road to Paris, the meeting in Paris at the end of 2015, is viewed as the critical time to try to reach international collaboration, cooperation in moving towards a low-carbon future. We are certainly in the middle of that, along with many of our sister agencies. Certainly, the clean energy agenda is one that we have, I would say, the prime responsibility to move forward on. We're very active in the interagency, in the White House discussions about, again, how we as a country are going to march to Paris, hopefully with ambition and with partners from the international community who will have similar ambition in advancing our climate goals. The Climate Action Plan that the President put out last year, as you may remember, really had three major pillars: mitigation of climate risks, adaptation to climate impacts, and international collaboration, which is, of course, necessary for achieving a global solution to climate. Just here at the department, a few kind of call-outs. I'm sorry, I really can't go through all that's happening here, but on the efficiency front, which is central to any solution, and I want to give a call-out here to EERE, we will issue 10 final rules this year on energy efficiency, and to give you a scale, that is twice as many in half the time compared to the previous 2 years. So the team has really been doing great work, working in a very, very collaborative way with OMB, with OIRA, and so we're really making a big difference there. If I go to the deployment end of the Loan Program Office, it's got lots of stuff out there, but what I want to emphasize here is the $40 billion of authority remaining with that office, and basically we'll be looking to deploy that over the next couple of years across the board: fossil solicitation, and renewables and efficiency, nuclear, and the Advanced Technology Vehicle Program, which itself has almost $17 billion of authority left. And we're out there very actively promoting this, and it's going to be a busy time, an exciting one, building on the successes that this program has had, really, in jump-starting a whole bunch of important things. We could go through all the biggest battery plant, the biggest the PV plant, the et cetera, et cetera. But I'm more interested in the next $40 billion as opposed to the last 30. Another issue which was brought up in the Climate Action Plan, it's a huge lift for this department, the Quadrennial Energy Review, and this is bringing together agencies across the entire government for a coherent policy, in this case, for the first year, focused on energy infrastructure. And in terms of, I think, again, the accomplishments in this department, first of all, we have multiple energy ministers from other countries coming to us already. How can we do a QER? How do you put this kind of stuff together? It's really an amazing amount of work. And this was done at the same time that the new office, EPSA, Energy Policy System Analysis, was being set up. So I think the amount of, you will see the product of this in late January, and the amount of work and the quality of analysis, I think, is remarkable. Really want to congratulate again the EPSA for leading the cross-government implementation of the QER, and that's going to be very, very, very important. Adaptation, just say we have everything there from being part of the administration's third climate assessment put out, I think it was in June, and pointing out pretty graphically the challenges we already face in different parts of the country, but also very specific projects. One of our $1 million investments, which went to Sandia to design a microgrid for New Jersey as part of their Sandy recovery, has now leveraged hundreds of millions of dollars to actually do a big microgrid project there. So that's a very interesting example of resilience and adaptation. International, we're working very hard with our colleagues with China, which is obviously central to the climate agenda. And again, I'll say again, a note of congratulations, in this case with International leading it, that our Climate Energy Research Center collaboration with China has been such a great success that a year in advance we've already agreed to renew it for a second 5 years going forward. And another one very close to the president's personal push, the energy ministerial that we hosted with Africa prior to the president's summit with more than 40 African countries. Another place where we're going to be looking ahead. Energy security is another important area. Again, the president led the G7 to charge the energy ministers to look at energy security. Ukraine is obviously an important part of that. And again, IA, International, with EPSA, with fossil energy, with nuclear energy, and others, has been really advancing a major development there. Ukraine drove this a lot, and not quite back yet, but again, from International, Bill Bryan has led a team, DOE-led team, involving multiple agencies, national labs, and Canadian energy people in the Ukraine for more than 2 weeks, helping them develop an energy contingency plan for the winter. There are the science underpinnings we can never forget. Again, the Office of Science, they're now into a second round of an enormously successful Energy Frontier Research Center program. ARPA-E is going great guns. They're planning now for an open call, for example, for new projects. So just a tremendous amount going on, and I think really high quality work coming from many places in this department. Nuclear security is kind of the same story in the sense of success. Just in less than a year and a half, removed all the HEU and plutonium from 7 countries, so our non-proliferation program deserves great credit there. And as well as in December, ending the historic 20-year megatons to megawatts program on schedule, 500 tons of Russian HEU converted to nuclear fuel. Stockpile certification, never lose sight of the fact of our critical responsibility there. 22 years now we have succeeded there, and the lab directors will say we know more about that today than we would have if we had kept testing. So this is, again, a tremendous success, literally inventing a new way of addressing the stockpile. Again, in science, many things we could talk about. They have been a leader in a new approach in which we are doing cross-cuts across especially the science and energy offices, subsurface science and engineering. There's another one on grid modernization led by OE and EERE. Next generation computing, exascale computing, again, it's stepping back. It's really breathtaking to see how much work we are accomplishing here. EM, some of the most challenging problems on the face of the Earth, or slightly below the surface of the Earth, but there again, a very novel approach. You all know we're still in the middle of this, but a novel approach, a whole reframing of how to approach the biggest problem out there, the waste treatment plant at Hanford. We're still working with the state to get that resolved, but this was a tremendous, I think, accomplishment as well. The labs, we're working, I think, in a different way with the labs, much more of a strategic relationship. We've established the Lab Policy Council, the Lab Operations Board. I think both are functioning as they were envisioned. And then maybe a month ago, and Congressional led this, a really fantastic lab day on the Hill, where the labs as a system came together to show the power of our science and technology base at work. Human resources is another area doing great work. That's both on the kind of efficiency side, and HR has done a great job there. It's also in things like our focus on women in clean energy, minorities in energy. We'll have our 1-year anniversary of minorities in energy in a few weeks, with lots of ambassadors going out there and really carrying the message about both opportunity and need in energy for using all of our human capacity. I'd love to go into more, but also community colleges, an increasing focus here. I was just in Austin last week at Austin Community College and saw the benefits of a federal assistance, in this case from Department of Labor, to bring to this community college of 41,000 students a whole new technology-based approach to the math education that they need to provide the foundation for what will hopefully be future jobs in energy and other STEM-based areas. So anyway, that's just a little kind of overview, but I wanted to really give all of you credit for what's going on in so many different areas, and I think with great impact. Liz Sherwood-Randall, again, as I said earlier, we will be running a kind of a unitary operation, but again, that does not hide the fact that she will have a bunch of lead responsibilities. I mentioned, for example, the lab operations. The lab operations board is under S3, excuse me, but Liz will be playing a very important role in all of these councils, the lab council, but emergency response, including working with utility CEOs. Infrastructure modernization is an important initiative. Fusion is a place where I'm still recused, so she will definitely lead on that one. The Cyber Council, the Power Marketing Administrations, a whole number of international energy dialogues, chairing the Credit Review Board for the loan program, chairing the new, not yet still announced ESAB for a major project acquisition. But we're very close to refining that. But that's just a reference to the fact that ESAB is going to be much more now of a standing organization to try to strengthen our project management. She'll be our person on the President's Management Council. And we're also doing some new things going forward, some voluntary, some not entirely. But for example, we will be establishing a nuclear policy council to look at nuclear issues across the whole department. So from nuclear energy to nuclear security issues. We will be establishing a job strategy council, a strong focus on, again, this really the human capital development for energy. We will be responding when we get the final report of a very important governance panel appointed by the Congress for NNSA. So Liz, you'll have plenty to do. And with that, I'm going to ask you to come to the microphone.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I'm incredibly excited to be here and to join the DOE family and to begin what I hope will be an extended conversation, both using technology as we are today and also in person as I get out around the country to meet many of you. We are streaming this live. I think we are touching people from NREL's Golden Field office to my former home in the East Bay, where Lawrence Livermore Lab is located, to the Nevada test site, to Germantown, where, as you noted, our whole NNSA team is located today, to Argonne National Lab, to Bonneville, to Brookhaven, and many more. I'm delighted that we can connect in this way, though I think it would be even better if we can do it live. So we're beginning work to plan for me to get out to meet many of you and learn more about what you do. This department has such extraordinary capabilities, and they are truly unique assets to this country, and they enable us to be strong, to lead the world, to drive innovation, to grow our economy, to do all the things that we need to do for this generation and for future generations of Americans. We have the privilege of serving in times of enormous change and also of opportunity and innovation. And that places a special responsibility on us as those who work for the taxpayer to deliver for them. There's a great deal at stake, and we owe them the best value that we can produce for what they invest in us. We have a solemn responsibility to ensure that our nuclear infrastructure and the entire enterprise and the weapons that it ensures remain safe, secure, and effective deliver deterrence now and in the future. And that's something I've been very actively involved in over the course of my career. Most recently, it brought me into contact with the new Secretary of Energy as I worked to implement the President's new nuclear employment guidance, and we joined forces in an endeavor to ensure that we had the funding necessary to support the enterprise, something that we will continue to do as we approach the next budget cycle. We want to do what the Secretary has just described, unlock new understandings in fundamental science and enable our nation to stay in the forefront of technological innovation. We are committed, as the Secretary noted, to fulfilling the President's all-of-the-above energy strategy and the climate action plan, and I'm extremely eager to learn about all of the very important work going on across the DOE enterprise in that vein. As I said in my swearing-in ceremony just a few days ago, I'm here for one reason, and that's to make our country stronger and safer, and I'm looking forward to working with each and every one of you in delivering for the American people. I'll come out and see you. I'll be available this afternoon as we take some questions. We have the possibility of meeting here and in the field. I intend to come to the labs, the production facilities, the PMAs, the environmental management sites, to meet with stakeholders across the DOE community and to learn about your perspective and learn how I can do a better job of supporting you as I take on the role of Deputy Secretary. We have microphones here in the auditorium. Where is John LaRue? There he is.
He's there.
John from our Public Affairs Office is going to help us with questions that have come into us in advance, and I believe we're also going to have the chance to hear from some of our team here in the auditorium today. So with that, I'll hand it over to you, John. Thank you.
Sure.
So also, if those in the audience could, there are these two microphones. I assume we need them to go to the microphones to be heard in the more distant parts of the complex. So we'll start with one of the external questions, but please migrate.
So this first question comes from Abigail. Given that the DOE workforce is only 23% female, what is your strategy for attracting, retaining, mentoring, promoting women into positions of leadership at DOE?
Well, we start with the Deputy Secretary, first of all, my understanding is that the number is actually something like 36%, but we can check that. Whether it's 20-something or 30-something, we have more work to do, clearly, and we're very committed to it. We're very committed to this. I'm going to ask Liz to add her perspective, but I have to say it's in who we hire, but it's also in who we help develop and get ourselves exposed to in terms of people who can come into these positions. And I'll tell you one place where I'm not satisfied, and I think a number of offices have gotten this message. A lot of our advisory committees are, in my view, we're shockingly low on women, and there were certainly plenty of qualified candidates. So I think, you know, it's nothing that we change overnight, but I think we are making progress, and we are committed to making more progress. I'll just mention one specific program. I alluded to it, where I think we've been really helping, and again, it'll take some years for the fruits of this effort to be fully expressed. But what's called C3E, or more colloquially, Women in Clean Energy. This started with the Clean Energy Ministerial that the President initiated, and in the second Clean Energy Ministerial, actually, the head of our EPSA office now, Melanie Kenderdine, was a panelist, and when she came back, even though not in DOE at the time, really helped get this department committed to that. It is going great guns, and in fact, in the World Energy Summit meeting in January, again in Abu Dhabi, although not the Clean Energy Ministerial, but in Abu Dhabi, they are going to have a major C3E program to see the Women in Clean Energy gets launched now more on a strong international basis. That's the kind of thing that we need. Get ambassadors out there, mentoring younger women, and making sure they understand the opportunity and the need that we have for them to enter into our world. Liz, do you want to add to that?
I had the pleasure yesterday of participating in a webinar that ARPA-E organized for women in the STEM community, and it was my first opportunity to talk to a group of women who we are encouraging and supporting in their efforts to involve more women in STEM work, and I look forward to doing much more of that in my new role. I will say that I think I probably got into this field in part because there were no women in the national security world when I began my career, and the center of that world was working on the hardest problem we faced, which was to ensure that we could deter a nuclear attack on the United States. And if you wanted to play, you had to do nuclear strategy. And little did I know that all these years later I would be sitting next to you, Secretary Moniz. But it was at the very outset of my career that I just decided what I needed to do was learn to do the hardest things, do them well. And many men opened doors. I have to say, while this is about empowering women, I need to give credit to the men who also made it possible for me to grow and advance professionally. It's a joint venture with our male partners. So together, I think we can encourage young women to choose career paths that are hard and challenging, that require the best of us, and that enable our country to continue to lead.
And maybe I should have added in your bio that you were also a Rhodes Scholar. Now, I don't know when that was in terms of when women started being Rhodes Scholars.
Very few years after it began. But women were only allowed to begin competing for Rhodes Scholarships in 1976, I think it was, and I was awarded a scholarship in 1981. And there were still places where people were incredulous that a woman would be received. And at the time, Margaret Thatcher was actually Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, but that had not permeated every place.
Detail,
and so
right. A little detail.
Right.
Anyway, so I mean, we have come a long ways in 30 years, but ways to go. Next question. Nobody in the hall has a question?
Got a list, but
yeah,
folks are welcome. This question comes from Philip. What changes in U.S. energy and foreign policy do you expect as a result of rapid increases in American oil production, for example, tight oil and fracking? What role do you expect the Department of Energy will play?
Well, first of all, obviously there's no question that the increase in both gas and oil production from shale has been pretty transformative in many ways. For oil, it may be some of you may not be quite as familiar with some of the numbers, but we are now down to something like 7.5 million barrels a day of crude oil imports, and
2.5 of that net is from Canada. So we're really down to 5 million barrels of oil per day and dropping from non-North American sources. That has had a tremendous impact, first of all, directly on our imbalance of payments. In fact, I saw that I think it was the last data were for maybe September. We had nearly a $2 billion drop in our oil bill in 1 month from those increases. So one, there's that direct economic impact in terms of resources kept here in our economy. Secondly, on the natural gas side, the low prices that we have here relative to those in any other major economy outside North America, I mean, so U.S. and Canada, where we have, let's call it $4 prices versus $10, $12, $17, $18 prices, another tremendous competitive advantage. When I was on Manufacturing Day, National Manufacturing Day, October the 3rd, and I went to Corning, there you had a company that had a real edge from its focus on innovation and research. 10% of their revenue going into R&D, a company that reinvented itself from a glass company to an advanced materials company. So it's a great American edge there in innovation. However, they also had rows and rows of kilns for ceramics, which were fired by natural gas. Another competitive edge because of the cost advantage. So that's certainly so part of the answer is that our economic benefits have been considerable. Those are in turn attracting a huge amount of manufacturing, of insourcing to the United States, manufacturing. That contributes to our strength. But then at a more, difficult to quantify level, we are looking at ourselves and we are being looked at by others in a very different way. We are being looked at as kind of an energy juggernaut, and that is influencing things like how we deal geopolitically with countries. I mentioned earlier, the situation in Ukraine has led to an entire re-examination of energy security issues among our allies and friends. And our strength in energy now is part of what drives this conversation. I did mention earlier Liz's previous work with Russia, Ukraine, and Eurasia. So maybe you'd like to add something on in that score. No. Yes.
I think I'll give opportunity for others to ask questions.
Okay. Great. Anyway, so it's a big change, and it will continue.
A question for the Deputy Secretary. Several people asked about your previous work with DOE and how DOE can cooperate with other agency partners.
That's a great question. Thank you to whomever asked it. I had the good fortune to work very closely with my predecessor. Dan Poneman and I have known each other for many years and were involved in a number of critical initiatives over the course of the first term and up until the time that he stepped down and I was sworn in. And as those of you who know Dan know, he likes to communicate late at night via email, and I'm still getting emails from him with good advice as I take on my new responsibilities. I've worked with DOE on a number of fronts. First of all, of course, with NNSA, as I noted, on many aspects of ensuring that our nuclear enterprise can deliver what is required to ensure that the deterrent remains safe, secure, and effective, and that the underlying enterprise can continue to provide the stockpile stewardship far out into the future, as the Secretary noted. This is a crucial element of the President's guidance, both in the nuclear policy review and then in the new nuclear employment guidance that was issued in June of 2013. I also have worked extensively with NNSA on non-proliferation initiatives, spanning from our work on Iran to our work on Pakistan, other countries with which we have cooperative initiatives to reduce the threat of nuclear proliferation and nuclear terrorism. And most recently, I had the privilege of traveling with the President and Secretary Moniz to the Nuclear Security Summit in The Hague in March of this year, something that the Department of Energy has been crucially supportive of throughout the process that was launched by the President in 2009, and that is a global initiative to lock down nuclear material so that they can never get in the hands of those who might seek to do us or our friends and allies harm. And we have relied very heavily on DOE and will continue to do so for the implementation of the many initiatives that grow out of the Nuclear Security Summit process. So those are just a few examples of the opportunity I've had to work with DOE in this administration, and I am very eager to learn about those aspects of the department's work that I haven't yet touched, as the Secretary noted, and that'll be part of my coming online in the next few months.
I might just add that I think you briefly alluded to this, but as you probably know, most of you at least, that the majority of our budget is from the defense account. And that includes not only the stockpile and non-proliferation, naval reactors, intelligence, and environmental management, most of the environmental management budget. So obviously we have a very strong stake in the national security funding. As we also know, the Department of Defense is strained. They are acquiring, if anything, new missions. So it's a major discussion going forward how our whole national defense budget is going to be structured. I just want to say that last year in her role at the National Security Council, she alluded to this, but it was very, very crucial that the Liz was part of that discussion along with the National Security Advisor, Susan Rice, the OMB, DOD, DOE, really the national security community. We really have to come together in terms of how we are going to allocate these constrained resources. Very important for DOD, very important for us. And so Liz has that experience directly already, and this is going to be one of our major efforts this year across the administration.
I'd also add one additional point, because DOE has taken such an important leadership role in emergency preparedness and response. And you've asked me, as you noted, to lead our work in that regard. Of course, being on the national security team, this whole issue of emergency preparedness, whether it's for natural or man-made disaster, has been a very high priority. And I've had the privilege of working, again, with Dan on this when he was deputy, and with others in the department, to ensure that we're ready for anything. The more we prepare, the better we will respond. We'd like it to never happen, but bad things do happen. And we're going to do a lot of work together to ensure that we are as forward-leaning as we can be.
Even to good people, right?
Yes.
Okay. Come on, surely there's somebody in here who has a question. Oh, this.
Yes, the
Great.
mic's right behind you.
Excellent.
Oh. My name is John Greenhill. I work in the Spectrum group.
Sorry.
But I have a question about solar weather. A bad solar weather storm can in fact disrupt the electrical grid, and it can give rise to a long-term outage lasting more than a month. This is be a catastrophic event. The question is, the FERC has issued an order to the utility companies to prepare for this event, and their design basis is the most probable worst case. But we knew from like Fukushima, the most probable worst case, we don't know how the sun works, and we should be planning on the worst case, and because it's so catastrophic if we do have a long-term electrical outage. And the FERC, this standard they're designing for, the probability is that we will get a worse storm than they're planned for, and then for all the planning will be of naught. And so the question is, does DOE have a policy on these very rare but catastrophic events?
Well, I would say we don't have a policy, but we have a program, and a program that I think we need to grow further in terms of research and analysis to inform policy and regulation. I would say in the quadrennial energy review process I alluded to earlier, in this first year is focused on energy infrastructure. That, of course, includes electric grids, and that includes looking at the spectrum of threats, extreme weather, cyber, physical security, geomagnetic, above ground, way above ground weather, space weather, if you like, and the interdependencies of different infrastructures like electricity and IT and fuels, et cetera. So we are, as I said, this infrastructure installment of the QER is due out at the end of January, and it will help to map out our approach to these, this kind of, I would say, integrated set of threats. The geomagnetic is one of those, and as you probably know, there remain some unanswered technical issues in terms of how the impacts are felt in various substations and the like. So anyway, I think what we will do is probably we have our labs are doing work in this. Maybe we need to actually up the game a little bit in that area. Yeah, it's a real risk.
Good afternoon, Secretary Moniz and Deputy Secretary, and congratulations on your appointment.
Thank you.
My name is Jacqueline Jones, and I'm a President's Management Council Fellow on a 6-month assignment to the Office of Learning and Workforce Development. I'd like to address a question to both of you, please. We recently initiated a new program here at DOE for women called Learning Circles for Women Leaders. Currently, we have 110 GS-14 through accepted service women employees who've signed up to participate. One of the requirements is that each participant has an SES mentor. We would appreciate your support in encouraging more DOE senior executives to participate as mentors in this program for aspiring leaders. And I'd like to just pose a question to ask your thoughts on how you could support us in our efforts and your thoughts on mentoring in general. Thank you.
Liz, you want to start?
I love to mentor young women, just as I had the privilege of being mentored, and there are some who are working here at DOE who know that. And I'd be so happy to meet with you and to learn more about the initiative and to talk about how we can ensure that we have a sufficient number of mentors to advise the women who've signed up for the program. So let's get together soon.
And I endorse that completely. So let us know if there really is a challenge in getting enough mentors. We will both put our shoulders to the wheel. That's great.
Hello, my name's Anne Marie Horowitz. I work in the Undersecretary for Management and Performance's office. And I'm wondering, I heard at the last CEOB meeting, Secretaries, Council, and Advisors, that only 5% of the workforce is under the age of 29 here in the building. So wondering what we can do to attract more young people in government. Thanks.
Go ahead, Liz. You're younger.
Everything is relative. Government has to do better. I mean, I think the most important thing we can do is show young people that they can make a difference in their future by serving their country. And some of that has to do with our demonstrating that we can deliver, as I mentioned briefly. Also, I think we need to do a lot more to make it easy for young people to come into government service. I've discovered that it's actually very hard. We have a lot of young people who have sought to find opportunities to work in the administration. It's very difficult. And streamlining those processes so that it's not, so that the gating to get in is not such a deterrent that you lose those who would like to find a way to serve is something very important to accomplish. We might we might take that back to the President's Management Council for consideration, because it's a problem government-wide, not just here in DOE.
Mm-hmm. So again, I certainly agree with Liz. Let me just add a couple of thoughts. One is, I think that first of all, using a variety of internships or internship-like positions, I think is very important, because, well, it's a good way, of course, for young people to learn about how we operate and for us to observe young people. But I want to emphasize that I think that we need to understand that even if it's 2-3 years in an agency like the Department of Energy or some of the other agencies, even if it's not a full career trajectory, I think it's a tremendously important experience. And frankly, it's important to us to have more people out in society, especially those who will be leaders of various organizations, understand how government works. There's a tremendous misunderstanding, in my view, as to how government works, how the people in government work, and that's partly our fault. And maybe part of that is that we don't have enough kind of young people kind of going through the system. So that's one point. Secondly, I think that that we can certainly have some department-wide approaches, and we should, and we do, and we could probably do more, and we'd love to get more ideas from you. But I think there are also tailored opportunities at in different offices. We don't have to have one size fits all. I'll give you as one example. I mentioned earlier the Energy Policy Systems Analysis Office that was just set up last year with the QER as a principal, not the only, but as a principal objective. The suggestion, at least I made, was why don't we look to have economics graduate students come in for 1 year, have a target analysis. It could be part of their degree program. And I think it'd be a tremendous value all around. That probably fits, that particular niche fits particularly in that analytical shop. But I think program offices should think more about that. Certainly, there's no question I would support kind of originality in ways of bringing in students and other young people even for a limited, task-driven time. Good for us, good for them.
We've seen in my former role, we have been able to recruit a number of hot young Silicon Valley innovators to help in the digital space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They've already, at very ripe young ages, made large fortunes and are really interested in doing something for the public good, mm-hmm. and are keen to come and contribute. Right. We make it pretty hard for that to happen in the federal workforce generally. Opening up ways to enable us to bring people in, just as you've said, for shorter cycles would fit more, I think, with the model for a younger generation who don't mm-hmm. come from the beginning of their career to the end of their career and stay in one institution, but are quite mobile and choose to move around mm-hmm. as opportunity presents itself, both geographically but also institutionally. Right. And if we can create mm-hmm. opportunities, we can get talent to join us.
And something else which is not geared specifically to young people, and I've asked for some thought to be given to the idea of how do we first of all now this is on the other side, get better career development mm-hmm. pathways, and I think we would gain from a substantially enhanced program of having more federal workers have a chance to spend a year at a laboratory, let's say, and vice versa, more of those people coming through here. It will help us in developing leadership. It develops our people to be part of what's happening in a lab or a site, et cetera. So I think this whole, I don't think, I think there's a lot more that we could do in terms of this kind of career development tracks. Another example, by the way, that's used often is, you know, some of our colleagues go, let's say, and spend a year at one of our embassies, do tremendously important work, but maybe not enough thought has been given to the reentry, and how that is a career-enhancing move and not a move that leads to, well, now where do I go, kind of a thing. So it's really an area that we want to give a lot more thought to, Liz.
Yes, sir.
Right.
A question from Joseph in Oak Ridge. What are you doing to assure that DOE employees can effectively bring forward concerns and that their concerns will obtain a timely and objective resolution?
Well, first of all, we're trying hard, and it's hard to continuously improve things like our safety culture, and part of doing that is making sure everyone understands there has to be an openness to getting input from people who are working in the line. I couldn't go through all the opportunities that we have, but certainly our ombuds person is one of the pathways. But we have mediation opportunities. We have a whole number of channels for this. But I think the key is to make sure that everybody understands those channels are there for a reason. They are open. They are to be used. We want the input. If there are issues of, you know, professional disagreement, that is a channel to be exercised and looked at in a clear, open way, because it's constructive. A lot of people have a lot of good ideas, and if we are not encouraging those to come up, we're hurting our programs in the end. So again, we will continue to do all that we can. We have often some legal institutional constraints in terms of what we can do in individual cases, but that is absolutely our intent. We will continue to try to advance that. Maybe there's a communication we should make to refresh people on all of these various pathways. That might be something to do, and again, good ideas are always welcome on this.
I'll just add a word on this. In the last year, I've led the work that the President requested to significantly improve our ability to combat sexual assault in the military, which has emerged as a very significant challenge to our armed forces and their readiness. And in that context, I learned a lot about the importance of creating a climate in which people feel safe to bring forward their concerns. And in the military context, it's called command climate. That's not what we would call it in the DOE context by and large, although in some DOE facilities that would be relevant, like naval reactors. But it's very important that we create, as you described it, a set of processes which involve individuals who are identified as being those to whom people can safely come to express concerns, that those expressions of concern are protected, to encourage rather than discourage others to come forward when they have concerns, and then to have a fair and balanced process for addressing the concerns with appropriate legal input to ensure the protection of all parties. And education is key in this regard. You mentioned the possibility of a communication. We certainly learned from our work in the DoD context about how important it is to have live education, not just online education, that the experienced people have in smaller groups where they can be involved in a direct interaction is valuable for the training that needs to take place. And I'm delighted to work with you to advance our efforts in this regard.
Great. Questions?
I think this is the last question we have time for. Directed to the Deputy Secretary. Where does Deputy Secretary Sherwood-Randall see the importance of energy efficiency as part of her plans?
It's part of everything we're doing. Hugely important. Obviously, we have tremendous opportunity in this department to advance our this country's innovation and economic strength and contribute to the President's goals on reduction of emissions, of carbon emissions. It'll be front and center in the work that I do alongside the Secretary as he described it. And so I'm raring to go.
Let me just add to that, that clearly the climate challenge is one that is absolutely critical and guides much of what we do here in our energy mission, clearly. And I would just say, flat out, I have never seen a credible long-term approach to the low-carbon future that we think we need to get to without a very strong demand-side push. A lot of things are a lot easier when you can work on the demand side, increase efficiency. And I guess what I would emphasize is that a lot of the programs that we have that may not be called efficiency are really about efficiency. So, I mean, efficiency standards, well, that's kind of obvious. But we have made, tremendous investments in manufacturing, loan programs, and, you look at what they're about. Advanced materials, why? To lightweight vehicles, why? To improve efficiency, et cetera. And we could go on. I mean, it cuts across the sectors, industry, buildings, vehicles, and often regulations or policies drive it, such as CAFE standards for vehicles, but we have to be out there helping the technology development that allows those standards to be met. So it's really a huge responsibility. It is absolutely core, and again, it permeates what we do more than we actually recognize.
And it's also a hugely important aspect of our international relationships. On the, as you described, the demand side imperative. This is something you've done so much for. The deputy who I succeed has as well, and I will continue to pursue those initiatives because we face a big challenge on in a number of countries where we've got to get them to change their ways if we're going to achieve our goals for the planet.
Right. Opportunity-rich environments.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Okay. Do we have time? We have one more question here in the front.
Can I get a microphone?
Can we get a microphone down here, please? And then I guess this will be the last question. Okay.
Thank you. One of the president's first initiatives when he was elected was to direct the agencies to create labor management partnership councils. Now we're 6 years into his administration and we still don't have one here. I think the previous director secretary wasn't very interested in that. And one thing that does is give employees a place to go to bring issues forward, and in a collaborative manner that is not adversarial between employees and management. And I'm wondering if that would be something you would be interested in doing now.
Okay, well, we will certainly look at that, yes. We do have some councils specifically with labor, for example, but let's have a look to make sure we are encompassing everyone. So we'll look at that, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great. Well, I guess actually we're out of time, but again, thank you for coming.
And thanks to all for listening who are
out there. And glad you all had a chance to meet the Deputy Secretary. And next time, those of you in the audience, come with more questions. All right. Thank you.
Thanks very much.